It's a high-tech conversation.
And a low-tech topic.
Live on the World Wide Web via Zoom. Bench Talk 101.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Bench Talk 101. Tonight's speaker, I came across him probably a good 3, maybe years ago, possibly 4 years ago. And I joined Bench Talk, and there was people talking about this American group that was very similar. I should maybe spotlight myself. That's a good start. I came across our speaker tonight, and his version of what Bench Talk is in America is called a plane life. Some people here have heard of it, and some people have joined. And for I don't know how many years, it was quite regular, and it was on every week, Fridays, Saturdays, and it started in a similar way where people were used to meeting up and talking about tools. And the host of that show is Greg Ricketts, and he's here tonight to give us a talk on he makes and sells. He's going to obviously tell us that Japaning for planes. So he's going to go through the process, I think. And I've seen some of this, not all of it, but the process of what he does to make it and the process of what you really need to do to prepare your plane, different ways. And obviously then set it. We'll call it that, and we'll let Greg stick to the accurate terms for all that, because I'm no expert in Japaning, but it's a really interesting topic. So welcome, Greg. Let's get you on to wherever you are. Spotlight to start.
Very good.
Welcome to Bench Talk 101. It's good to have you here.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks. It's great to be here. I've joined you guys on and off at various times throughout the many years. It is funny that Bench Talk 101 and what I started here in the States, Hand Planes and Coffee. When I went back and kind of looked at the records, we started within 10 days of each other.
Well,
Both I guess both of us had the same idea at the same time. You know, COVID was out there, and we couldn't meet anymore, and we took advantage of this technology. I don't think either one of us had any technical skills at all, but we managed to make it work. And lo and behold, still running. We've gotten to be pretty irregular now with Hand Planes and Coffee, mostly because of life events that have occurred with aging parents and all that. We've had a lot of interruptions on our end, but we're trying to get things going again a little more regular. But it's great to be here with you guys, and I look forward to sharing what I've learned about the Japaning process, which grew up around the hand planes. It's growing beyond that. Yeah, I've got a little presentation. We'll go through it. And
sure.
If you guys have questions, I think you have a process for raising your hand, and Scott will mediate that, and we'll take questions. So
I think after speaking to Greg before this, he's got some slides and he'll talk through parts of it. So if anyone's got questions, rather than interrupt and stick your hand up, and then a point maybe at the end of each slide there'll be point. He's willing to take questions as we go through the presentation rather than wait until the end. But it'll generally be kind of at the end of a slide or when there's not a pause, but he's used to doing this, so he's quite good at controlling it. But I'll just watch for hands or fill or pause as well, and we can stick up the spotlight. The only thing will be is we don't mind having some questions, and I think Greg mentioned this. He might actually switch off the screen share so that we can see people's faces when we're talking to each other, rather than talking and having him at the side of the screen, having like we've got just now. Couple of people talking to each other and asking questions. So we might switch off the screen share and then switch it back on again. But if you've got questions on the way through, stick your hand up and we'll come to you and let you ask questions. Over to you then, Greg. Thanks very much.
very good. Yeah, absolutely. Just preemptively, it's quite likely some of the questions, the answer will be hang on. We'll get to that in a moment. But by the same token, you guys will probably have some questions I've never thought about. And I look forward to that because I learn something every time I do a presentation. So we'll get started here. If I can make the technology work, we'll see. Let's see. We got the screen share going here. I think something like this. We hope. And let's see if we can get the presentation going. Let's see. Still not an expert on software after all this time, but we'll try to get it running. Here we go. Ah, yeah, okay. I think we've got things moving here. Hopefully you guys can see a picture of I think that's an old Ohio plane there that I refinished some years ago. So yeah, we're going to talk about recreating the traditional Japan black finish that we see on a lot of our old hand planes. Not all of them. There's definitely exceptions to this, and there's definitely kind of a time period when it quit being popular to Japan planes. But just real briefly, a little bit about myself. I live here in Alexandria, Virginia, which is just across the river from Washington, D.C. I spent my career working for the Federal Aviation Administration. I've been fooling around with woodworking, barely since I was about 11 years old. There's a lot of people out there that have so much more skill than I do, but I can generally get a couple boards to stick together and make it serve some kind of purpose. I do have a fairly large collection of planes that I've acquired over the years. Most of them uh, carry the Fulton brand name, if you're familiar with that, which consists of a lot of different manufacturers that supplied those over the years. Of course, I do have a web page that I market the Japanning through, but really the primary purpose of the web page was to share information that I had been searching for over the years, websites, documents, anything I could find. It was difficult to accumulate, so I started putting it in one place, hoping to make it a resource for folks. So if you ever are looking for something, maybe a catalog or some information, you might find it out of planelife.us. There's a research library there that's just free to use and no ads or anything like that. So help yourself. Um, of course, I do the hand planes and coffee. I do also work as an admin for the hand planes building, restoring, and collecting website that Don Willwall started many years ago. It's a very big site, about 50,000 members, a great group of people. Most of you are probably on it. And that's where all the expertise comes from, is folks like yourself. And then, a decade or so ago, I guess it's been now already, I started researching this Japanning that I heard about. Didn't know the first thing about it, but decided I wanted to try to recreate it and restore a hand plane as close to original as I could, and found that was a bit of a challenge to recreate that surface. So we'll take a look at what I've learned over the years and hopefully set you up if you want to play around with it, get you to a point where you can make your own, or you can buy it from myself. There's others places you can get it as well. We'll talk about and be successful with it. So let's see, hand planes and coffee we talked about. All right, so what is Japanning? And what in the world, why is it called Japanning? Some of you probably know this. You're familiar with the Japan lacquerware. It goes back at least 7,000 BCE. It actually started in China, but it's more widely known about 2000 BCE from Japan. Basically, it was a painted surface, painted finish on woodwork. Made its way into Europe in the 16th century, became popular in the 17th century in Europe among the elite. Of course, it's beautiful stuff. The incredible rich black color with many other colors and gold and stuff, applied to it as well. Became very popular, and then Japan went through a period of isolation in the 1700s and quit exporting it into Europe. And so tradesmen in Italy figured out a way to duplicate the process with local materials, local resins and pigments, and kind of carried it on. And they're the ones that kind of called it Japanning. It was Japan lacquerware from Japan, so they called this material Japanning. It kind of became a common name for it. What we really care about is when it was applied to cast iron, and that occurred in the 1700s. You had kind of the industrialization of cast iron products for home goods. It was kind of the aluminum of the day or the plastic of today, right? Bed frames and cookware, all kinds of things started becoming available in cast iron. And of course, as we all know, cast iron loves to rust. So figured out a way to apply the Japanning to it to keep it from rusting. And that was done in Pontypool, Wales, in the 17th century, mid 17th century. Thomas Allgood in Pontypool, Wales, is credited with being the first one to apply Japanning to cast iron. Uh, I don't know how accurate that is, but that pops up in a lot of locations that that's how it got started, and I think it's probably pretty true. But it grew into just anything cast iron or bronze or brass could be japanned. A lot of things we're familiar with, obviously the hand planes. I got a call from a guy one day wanted to know if he could put it on the handles of his scissors, and I was like, I guess. What are you talking about? Antique scissors, the black handles on those old shears. They were japanned. How did I know? He was a collector, and so he started re-japanning his shears. Um, uh, Antique desktop fan collector started restoring fans with japanning. I didn't know those were japanned. Uh, and then I got a call one day from a guy asking if japanning would stick to brass. I said, certainly will. I tested on brass. I have some brass plates that I test every batch just for adhesion and quality of finish. And I asked him why, and he said, well, the old cameras uh, that were black were typically made out of brass and they were japanned. So I did not know that. Of course, many of you may be familiar with the Sunbeam bicycles, kind of a popular story around Japanning. They got their name from the really shiny, reflective coat of the black and the gold on there, and that's why they called them Sunbeam. I don't know much about that, but they were a Japanned bicycle back in the day. The list goes on and on. I've had Model A and Model T automotive restorers purchase Japanning to repair the finish on their vehicles. Those cars were japanned. Not just the metalwork, but a lot of the woodwork was japanned on the early cars as well. So, anyways, um, what is japanning? It's very straightforward. It's generally just a binder, which is generally linseed oil, a pigment. Japanning was primarily used as a black coloration, but any pigment could be mixed into it, and still can be. But they are more challenging than the black pigments, and we'll talk about how you do that. But uh, the black was lamp black was very popular. Umber was a popular pigment that was used in Japanning, and then of course asphaltum, which became really the big commercial pigment in most of the Japanning, and it's what was used on most of the hand planes. I think just because of its availability. A drying agent was used to help the linseed oil cure. We call that boiled linseed oil today. We don't use the same drying agents. Back in the day, early on, they used lead-based drying agents. We use different ones today, but your boiled linseed oil has drying agents in it. And then a solvent, which typically is turpentine. Naphtha was also used quite a bit, particularly in Europe early on, as a solvent for japanning. But at its most basic, it's linseed oil, a pigment, and a solvent. And that's the basic mixture for japanning. Um, where to find this information? Well, there was a lot of places. I never ever came across really clear information. Like there was no publication from Stanley that said this is how we mixed our japanning, or any other manufacturer out there. The closest I ever found was a publication that was published in the 1920s in a magazine called Automotive Industries. And it was a two-part article on the Ford Motor Company japanning of the early vehicles. And in there, they talked a lot about the various processes, about the japanning material itself, which they did not manufacture. They bought it from a japanning manufacturer. They bought it in big barrels of japanning. I kind of wonder if maybe Stanley and Sargent and some of the other manufacturers didn't do the same thing. They probably weren't making their own japanning. They were probably purchasing it from these suppliers that were producing it. It wouldn't surprise me at all if that's the case. Um, in the One of the really good information I got was in 2023, a gentleman contacted me who had been to the Stanley Toolworks museum or archives and was looking through some of the shop drawings for the Stanley Bailey hand planes. It was about a Type 9 or 10, maybe Type 11 hand plane. And these were the kind of working drawings that would go down to the floor. And he noticed on there that they had notes about the japanning process for the planes. And this was really kind of a revelation. we had assumed up to this point, at least I had, that the planes were japanned much the same way any other small cast iron product was, and that was just dunked into the tank. You allow the excess japanning to drain back into the tank, and then it often goes onto a rack or a hanger and into an oven. Um, but I could never quite figure out how they would, if they had done that, how did they keep the plane from fusing to the rack with the japanning on the bottom of the plane? Because it certainly would. It would act almost like an epoxy when it was cured. Um, and lo and behold, this drawing on the body of the plane itself very clearly stated that the body of the plane had the japanning brushed on 2 coats. So very coarsely and very quickly, kind of just slopped on, probably while the plane was sitting on the rack that it was going to go into the oven, or on a rack over the japanning um, container to capture the excess japanning. But they weren't completely submerged. The bodies weren't, which would have left the sole of the plane relatively clear of japanning and allowed it to sit on the racks when it went into the oven. The frogs, it did also say they were dipped and then brushed. So brush off the excess japanning after it was dipped, but the frogs were completely submerged. Now, all this was done before the parts of the planes were machined. So you've got to keep in mind that none of the holes were drilled, nothing was tapped. So, uh, putting it on heavy, letting it go everywhere, really not a problem because it's going to get machined afterwards. Um, Early on, when Rob Porter was looking at producing planes and had the prototype XOAs going, he wanted to do a Japan finish on them to try to be as traditional as possible. Um, Turned out that's a really bad idea with environmental rules today. And powder coating is a much better way to go. But we did do a Japan, one of the early prototypes, and we Japanned 100% of it because we were curious how it would respond in the milling process. Would it chip off? Was it difficult to mill? Did it gum up any of the tool works? Or was it a non-factor, as we kind of suspected? And so completely japanned all surfaces of a body and frog, and he ran them through the mill process. And as expected, it just milled beautifully, didn't chip, left clean surfaces the way you see your planes when you find them. So everything you see that's not japanned on a hand plane was generally a milled surface or a machined surface that removed the japanning. And that's kind of important when you go to restore the finish on one, and we'll talk about why. Um, how it's machined informs you on how you japan it. So, any questions so far? We've been zipping along here through kind of the background stuff on japanning before we get into the fun stuff.
I don't see any hands up.
Okay,
Nobody's got their hands up at the moment, so we could probably just carry on. Yep.
great.
Could I just ask one question? See,
Yeah, go ahead.
just about, is there always a drying process then which needs heat?
On the metal, yes. Um, on the Ford vehicles, they japanned the exterior wood of the car. The window sills were wood. The spokes of the wheels were wood. And those they used the Japan dryers. That's if you're familiar with the dryers that you can still buy today that are used to speed up curing process of enamel paints. Um, they use the Japan dryers when they're japanning wood because obviously you can't put the wood through the same heat process without damaging it. I have used dryers and I have japanned wood as well as the metal. I've experimented with Japan dryers on metal, and I think it might be possible to cure japanning on metal using only dryers and not heat, but the window of success is exceedingly narrow. You're going to have to get your mixture of dryer to japanning down to the milliliter, and I think it would be affected by just room temperatures and humidity as well. I think what you'd find is that you generally would experience a high rate of failure, a finish that would have to be stripped and redone, which is what I experienced when I tried it several times on metal. But on wood, it works great because the uh, the solvent can outgas through the wood. The dryer causes the surface of the japanning to cure very quickly and traps the gases in it, and then the surface wrinkles. And that wrinkled finish is impossible to overcome. You've got to strip it and start over. So,
Thank you.
you
We've
bet.
got another question from Phil as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, since we paused for questions, it's a very quick one. In the initial rundown, you said japanning can be used on leather. And I was just wondering how flexible it is. How well does it stick? Have you seen that in use?
I don't recall mentioning it was used on leather. If I did, I
Oh,
misspoke.
okay. Don't
I
worry.
don't know. It's not flexible,
I wouldn't have
not
thought
in
so.
its
No,
cured
no, no.
state. So yeah, I don't think
Good.
so.
No.
Yeah.
Um, that makes sense, certainly.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get a little bit more into the how-to. So I had, you can find the basic formula of Japanning. It's no big mystery out there. It's generally 2 parts um, solvent to 2 parts pigment to 1 part linseed oil. 2-to-1 is the ratio. And that holds generally pretty true. I think with other pigments besides asphaltum, if you're using lamp black, you might have to adjust a bit. Um, but it's a pretty good starting point. Um, I fooled around with the ratios a lot. I fooled around with a lot of different techniques. If you do much research on Japanning, you'll come across what they talked about cold Japanning or cold varnish. Um, Myself and Mark Nickel, who's a big collector, both played around with that, and we're never successful at getting a good finish with the cold Japanning. A couple of issues with that. The asphaltum that you get is ground to a 200 mesh. It's not super fine like what an artist would use in oil paints. Artists will grind their own pigment for oil paints. Very similar process to Japanning. And so you get a gritty finish when you mix it in with varnish, whereas the asphaltum dissolves in the turpentine and naphtha. So you eliminate a lot of that grit. The second problem with the cold Japanning is it tends to wrinkle when it cures. I did, I don't know, 15 or 20 different attempts with this and never managed to successfully get an entire plane to cure without the wrinkling. And Mark Nickel had the same result. So I'm not so sure that the cold Japanning information that's out there on the World Wide Web is really something that anybody was really successful with on metal. It may be more theory, or maybe it was used on wood, but I don't think you'll be successful with it on metal. Um, so I did a lot of testing of the ratios, small massaging of the ratios. I've done a lot of testing on filtering Japanning. When I produce it commercially, I filter it only because it allows me to move a little faster through the process and provide a more consistent product commercially. But it's not necessary that you filter Japanning if you make your own. The Anything that doesn't dissolve in a Japanning mixture slowly settles to the bottom. And the general rule of thumb was you never stirred a tank of Japanning because anything that was an impurity in there, or if you just had too much pigment, then the solvent could deal with it, would settle in the bottom of the tub or the bottom of whatever the Japanning container was, and not cause any ill effects. Unfiltered or stirred up, you will get that gritty finish, which is undesirable and require you to do some work to overcome it. So I filter it. I have a video I produced about how you can filter it if you're making small quantities at home. But I really think if you're going to mix your own, the best way to do it is to just mix it, let it sit at a good temperature, a room temperature for weeks, a month if you have time. Let it settle, and you'll get a better product and a whole lot less work and less mess. Um, I did a lot of testing on heat cycles. I started with information I found from a U.S. Civil War reenactor who was experimenting with Japanning tinware. A lot of the mess kits and things like that that the soldiers carried were japanned. I'm not sure that was a great health idea, but for whatever reason, it was Japan. And so he had some information about how he successfully japanned this tinware. And he had a 5-stage heating and cooling process that he went through to cure the Japanning. Um, Very lengthy, took a day or two to get through it. It certainly produced good results, but I was hoping to shorten it down quite a bit. And I really felt like there were areas that we could reduce those number of cycles and reduce the curing time. And eventually I did come up with what I believe to be the shortest possible curing time, heat curing for Japanning, that still guarantees you a really high degree of success. I've pushed those limits and created problems with the finish. And I always try to provide advice that will keep people in kind of a good, safe zone of success. Um, if you've ever tried to take Japanning off a plane, the last thing you ever want to do is to have to strip one down that you've japanned because the finish didn't turn out. because it bonds to metal like none other, and it's just so much work. I never wanted anybody to have to go through that process of stripping a plane down because I gave them bad advice. So everything I've done has been to try to give people a real good margin of success. Um, I did a lot of testing on alternatives to Japanning, and there's some that I still recommend to people. First off, and most of your modern plane makers use uh, powder coating. Lee Nielsen powder coats, Veritas powder coats. I think they probably all do. There may be somebody out there using enamel, but powder coating is a great finish for a plane. It is, I would say, as tough as Japanning. I'd say it's the modern version of it. Uh, get this, it's almost indistinguishable in its final finish from Japanning. I'm not sure I can. I have Rob Porter tried to fool me with a Japan plane versus a um, powder coated one. He powder coated a plane and then sent me pictures of the one I had Japanned and the one that was powder coated and asked me to pick out which was which. And I was able to do it only because I remembered a few casting flaws in the one I had Japanned, but I don't know that I could tell the difference. So powder coating is a great way to go, but it's not always something that the home hobbyist has access to. Yeah, you can get into it. I have done it in the past, but it can be a little challenging, particularly on small planes. There's a thing called the Faraday effect, which can be a little difficult to overcome. But if you're interested in powder coating, I would say by all means dig into it. It's a great finish for a hand plane. It's very environmentally sound. It's fairly economical, not a lot of wasted product, and it has a very short heat cycle, heat cure cycle. The temperatures are about the same, 350 to 400 degrees, but it's only about a 10-minute cure. So it's a great way to go. A little more approachable, a little easier for the home hobbyist if you have a tool that you don't want to put through the heat process for some reason, or you don't have an oven, are some of the urethane-based paints. Rust Seal is one brand. POR or POR 15 is another brand that's pretty common out there. These are basically a two-part paint that uses moisture as the second part. So once they're exposed to air and any moisture that's in the air, they begin to cure very rapidly. They produce a very hard finish. They bond almost as well as Japanning or um, powder coating. Not quite as well, but very, very close. They bond real well to the surface. They flow out extremely well. They're brushed on like Japanning, but they self-level. There are no brush strokes at all when you're done. It absolutely flows out glass smooth and cures within a few hours, just at room temperature. Um, the times I've used it, I've done just a single coat and gotten away with it, although two coats might be a better way to go. But again, if you have a tool like maybe an older combination plane, you don't want to risk taking the wood off the handle, which is riveted on, but you want to try to restore the finish, those are good options. They're tougher than spray enamels, better adhesion, and give you a almost indistinguishable look to Japanning because of the way they flow out. So, excellent products. Of course, I've re-enameled many planes with spray enamel, brush on enamel. I've never used automotive enamel, which is the heat cured, like they use on cars. Um, I believe that's what Miller's Falls was doing with their enamel because it's extremely tough, much tougher than anything I've experienced. Heat curing spray on enamel or heat curing brush on enamel that's not designed to be heat cured doesn't really do anything for it as far as um, giving it any greater strength. It's you can shorten the curing time a little bit with it, but it can be a little bit risky. But you can certainly get a good look with spray enamel if that's what you want to do, or if your plane calls for it. Again, if you're finishing a Miller's Falls plane, those were enameled. Those were never japanned. I believe the record planes, of course, were all finished in enamel. Clifton planes are enameled or were enameled. They may be powder coated today. The black ones, I don't know. Um, so it's obviously a reasonable way to finish. I just didn't find it very durable. The planes that I had enameled within a dozen uses or so, I would somehow chip the finish or scrape the finish on the bed of the plane or the frog, and it just wasn't as durable. But you can certainly get a great look with it. Um, There are other manufacturers of Japanning out there. Old Pontypool is available here in the U.S. It's sold by a company up in New York. I don't know if it's sold internationally. I don't know where it's manufactured. I don't know if this company in New York, the supply house, is manufacturing it, and I don't know anything about the ingredients because they don't publish it. But I do own some. I have used it. I would say that it is probably exactly the same as what I'm mixing, although it seems to be mixed exceedingly thick. I thinned it down to use it, um, but it seems to be a very good product. So if somebody wanted to go that route, by all means. Uh, the biggest reason I started selling Japanning was old Pontypool was only sold in 1 quart cans, and you can pretty much Japan a car with a quart of Japanning. I mean that it covers so much. A quart of Japanning, you'll never get through it before it hardens off in the container. It's just that's so much Japanning. I sell 1/4 pint containers. They're quite small, but you can do probably a dozen number 4 size planes with one of those cans. So a more reasonable quantity of Japanning, so you're not throwing it away. But Old Pontypool seems to be a very good product. It heat cured exactly the same. I couldn't tell any performance difference in it, but I don't know what's in it.
We do have another question, if that's okay.
Yeah, yeah, by all means.
Let me just spotlight Paul.
Sure.
There you go.
Hi, Greg. Nice to see you.
Yeah.
So, with the alternative to Japanning, is it a similar process? Does the plane have to be stripped down to the same level in order to?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say yes, Paul. Yeah, with any of these finishes, whether they're spray enamels, the urethane paints, the brush-on paints, if you have areas of Japanning loss on the surface of the plane, that will cast a shadow essentially through any new material you put on top of it. So the edge of that defect will always show. I have done spot repairs on Japanning, and it's a tremendous amount of work. I don't think it saves any time at all, but it is possible to clean in Japan just a small area of lost Japanning, but then you have to sand it and blend it into the surrounding to remove that ridge that is formed as you build the layers up inside that lost area. So I think stripping a plane down is definitely a time saver and guarantees a very uniform finish. Um, Japanning is a very good sandable primer. So if you wanted to clean the plane, make sure you have nothing on the old Japanning, and clean any of the metal that you're going to put new Japanning on. It's got to be very clean because if it's still got rust on it, nothing's going to stick to it. You could Japan over the existing Japanning, sand it all down smooth, add another coat, sand it smooth until any of those imperfections disappeared. But I think it would end up taking more time than just stripping the plane. And we'll talk a little bit about stripping the plane. I've learned got some great feedback from somebody who Japans a lot of planes, um, who I did some stripping for. For those of you that don't know, I use a media blaster to strip the planes. I happen to have a media blasting cabinet, a big commercial compressor setup, and so it takes me just minutes to strip a plane. Um, but I have stripped them without using that, just so I know what other people are up against. And it is a lot of work, which is why I try to make sure you never have to do that a second time. But there's a product sold here in the States. Probably an equivalent product is available internationally. It's called Citra Strip, and it's a paint remover. It's a relatively non-toxic, doesn't have all the horrible odors. You don't need a mask. Um, and if you put that on the plane, a nice heavy coat, and then either wrap the plane up in cellophane or put it in a plastic bag and seal it up tight so that that stays moist for about 8 hours or overnight, the Japanning will just about come off with a toothbrush. You might have to scrape a little bit off with a wooden tool or something, but it's almost all just going to come right off.
Wow.
So yeah, Nate at MSSI Toolworks, who does all the restorations of miter boxes, He's real big Stanley miter box, anybody's miter box kind of guy. Nick started doing hand planes. Nate, um, and uh, started doing them for customers, and I stripped some planes down for him that he was shipping to me. But of course, shipping planes around to do one part of a process is a money losing proposition. And so he started playing around with strippers. I had used some strippers in the past, mostly very noxious, toxic, like airplane strippers that would work, but they were horrible to deal with. And he was the one that told me about the citrus strip and how much success he had with it. So I went ahead and tried it. And he absolutely verified what he said. And that's how he strips planes, and he does them for customers. So the citrus strip is definitely a good way to go on the stripping old Japanning. So
Okay, thanks for that, Greg.
yeah, you bet. Okay, let's see. I'm gonna be find the share button again, which is hiding from me here. Hang on. Where'd it go? Share screen. Oh, here we are. All right, let's see if we can get back to. Okay. All right. Okay, so learning from experience. One of the things I learned from experience is Japanning can be pretty messy. The pigment, gilsonite or asphaltum, gilsonite's kind of a trade name, asphaltum is a generic term. It's kind of like copier toner. It's a very fine powder, and it tends to just get everywhere when you're working with it. And God help you if you ever actually spill any Japanning. I have spilled at least a quart of Japanning before in my lap, and that's why I can tell you that it doesn't remain flexible because those pants did not stay flexible after that. And cleaning it up once it's in a liquid form, it gets on the ground and it's like ink. It just multiplies as you mop it up. So um, definitely have a good clean workspace when you go to Japan and be a little bit cautious. But some of the questions that come up, how about mixing my own versus commercial mix? Uh, I have encouraged a lot of people in other countries to mix their own for quite a while. I was not shipping internationally. I do ship the pre-mixed Japanning internationally. I do sell small quantities of gilsonite, so you can mix your own little quarter ounce or quarter pint if you want to. Um, there's another brand of gilsonite or asphaltum that's available generally pretty widely. Although it seems like it's gotten scarce in Australia and Canada lately, but Rublev, Rublev, is a manufacturer of artist pigment. They sell all these dry pigments for artists to mix their own oil paints. One of the pigments they sell is asphaltum, and they sell it in it must be about a pint of not Japanning of the pigment, the asphaltum, which is a lot. That will mix quite a bit of Japanning, but it's pretty affordable. So if you want to mix your own, you might check with your artist supply stores and see if they have the Rublev um, asphaltum available. Um, I do have instructions on my website to help you mix Japanning, and I certainly will give you some tips tonight that I think are really helpful if you decide to mix your own. That can help you avoid throwing out a batch. I have thrown out many batches as I've learned, um, but we'll go over that. I certainly encourage people to mix their own. I understand some people don't want to. That's why I produce it, and I'm more than happy to supply it. But I'm more than happy to do anything to let people experiment with the Japanning, however it works for them. So, um, one thing about the Japanning, when you're mixing it, is I recommend mixing by volume, not by weight, which may not be as accurate, but the asphaltum powder is so extremely lightweight. It's like flour. It's ground to 200 grit. That you've got to have a very, very good scale if you're going to mix by weight. I've had a few people that have tried that, and it's generally caused problems. So if you mix by volume to that 2-to-1 ratio, it'll work out fine. There's the ratio isn't that critical, and there's some areas where I can kind of point you to some tips on that. Here in the States, we have a few states here in the U.S. that have banned basically all solvents. Anything that's got any kind of volatile organic compound, you can't get. California, a lot of California has done that. They can't get turpentine, they can't get naphtha, they get substitutes that don't seem to work. So if you cannot get real turpentine, but only a turpentine substitute, I would look for something other than Japanning because you're not going to be successful, at least to date, using any of the substitutes. The results have been very poor. So um, I guess maybe at some point in the future, Japanning will come to an end when none of us can get turpentine. So uh, room temperature curing. So that's always the big question is, can I cure it at room temperature? And you'll find information out there on the internet that says yes, you can. It takes 30 days or whatever, and it'll cure at room temperature. I can tell you that I have japanned a plane and I let it sit for 4 months at room temperature, about 76 degrees. And at the end of 4 months, I can still put my thumbnail through the Japanning. So it does require heat curing. Um, if you're going to use it on metal. If you're going to use it on wood, you can add the Japan dryers to it and it'll cure at room temperature, but not on metal. There's a number of ways that you don't have to have a big oven to cure it in. I have some ideas on that, but that can be a challenge. And that's why I always tell people about these other options out there if you don't have the ability to heat cure. Um, what I call staying in the flight envelope. Uh, Again, I try to put a large margin of safety around telling people how to Japan a plane or how to mix their Japanning. Because if it goes wrong, it's so much work to go back and start over again. So you can cure a plane faster, you can mix Japanning faster, you can apply it thicker, you can do anything and shorten the time than what I'm going to tell you it's going to take. But all of that starts to carry with it a lot of risk of failure, risk of getting a finish that is very undesirable, a lumpy, wavy finish that you end up stripping off and starting over. So I think I've got this down about as fast as it'll go. It can be a 1 day process, but I typically tell people you're going to spend 2 days Japanning a plane because you're going to do several coats. Um, how about colors of Japanning? Always a popular question. If you're familiar with Ohio Tool Company hand planes, they had red Japan hand planes for a while. I think there was another one that was manufactured in the Midwest of the U.S. I can't remember the name of it. Modern Hand Plane Company did red Japan. They were Japan. They were red. And of course, if you look at Japan lacquerware, a lot of colors. And yes, you can Japan with just about any pigment. Asphaltum is the easiest because it dissolves in the turpentine, so you get very little grit. Other pigments, modern pigments, are not ground fine enough, so they have to be mulled to be ground fine enough to produce a good finish, which is what an artist does if they're making their own paints. Again, some artists want to mix their own paints from scratch. They buy the pigments, they mix it with the oils, and produce their own paints. And they grind those pigments between a plate of glass and a glass pestle called mulling, usually with a little bit of linseed oil in there to kind of keep the material together as they grind it. But it takes quite a bit of time, and but it needs to be ground to I'd guess oh at least twice as fine as the 200 grit uh, asphaltum that you would typically have, finer than copier toner. But it can be done. So if you really want to Japan a plane in blue, or if you really want to do one in red, you certainly can. But you're going to definitely want to mull the pigment. Otherwise, you're going to get a very gritty finish. So the original reds that were used, I think, by Ohio and some of the others, I'm pretty sure were cinnabar, which is basically a mercury oxide pigment, which is still available today, but very restricted and not something you really want to be working with. Not, it's not. It's a great way to poison, get yourself mercury poisoning. So, but modern pigments, of course, are safe. We talked a little about Japanning touch-up, right? Paul asked about, do you have to strip it? Um, Again, I've done this. I think it's faster, and um, you're going to be much more successful in the end if you strip the plane and just re-Japan the entire tool. Um, so I don't recommend trying to touch up Japanning, but it is possible.
Can I just
Uh,
ask before you move on then? Sorry,
yeah,
Greg.
yeah, sure.
Go back to the last slide, maybe. Make it
Yeah.
easy. As far as colours go, and here's where my naivety comes in. Um, record planes, notoriously, all of them were made in blue. I take it that's a paint finish and not Japan then?
Yeah, pretty sure they're enameled. We don't know exactly when Japanning disappeared from, production, particularly around hand planes. But I think it's pretty safe to say just about any plane that was produced after World War II is probably not Japanning. We know that in 1929, 1930, when Miller's Falls started producing hand planes, they used only black enamel. So you had really high quality, very durable, affordable black enamels available in the industrial setting by 1930, at least here in the US and probably worldwide. The chemistry is not a big mystery. So I think that some manufacturers, had some infrastructure that had them hang on to the Japanning process a little bit beyond the 1930s. 1940s with the World War, I don't think anybody was making big capital investments in changing their production. But probably shortly after World War II, I think you probably saw Japanning move away because there were, at least at the Stanley manufacturing here in the States, we have records of two very serious explosions in the Japanning curing ovens. Now, these were enormous walk-in ovens the size of a good-sized room that would have maybe 500 to 1,000 hand planes in them curing at one time. They'd run them in there on trays and then start the ovens up and let them run overnight. And some of those ovens, you had various heating methods that they weren't that separate from the flame, and it obviously there was an open flame in there, but the heating processes were not that separate from the flame, and that off gassing got concentrated enough that the ovens exploded, killed some workers, blew the doors off of these ovens. So you certainly had once you had a good industrial enamel available, there was good reason for companies to move away from Japanning.
So I understand that. That totally makes sense. And you mentioned Miller's Falls. They're notorious, or not. I keep saying notoriously. They're identifiable from having the red frog as well, and that would
Yeah,
be an ammo on the frog for them as well. So an ammo on the black enamel on the plane, and then red, or
yeah,
they used
yeah,
red on the planes as well. I think.
yeah,
Um, I take it the pigments, and that's one of the things maybe about Record deciding to use blue. I think from Nick Kroll talking about his milk paint, he was saying that blue is one of the hardest colours to get as a natural pigment because there isn't really, there are some natural blues. Blues and greens are the hardest ones to get because you've got
yeah.
all these browns and ochres and blacks that are quite easy to get natural pigments for. And
Yeah.
you can mix them easily, but sometimes they don't want to mix because of the types of pigments they are. And then maybe that's why they used the enamel. I'm not saying it was readily available more, like you said, and just as easy to apply. But so then with the enamel, is the enamel baked on as well?
I suspect it is. Certainly uh, the durability of the enamel that you see on those planes would lead me to believe it's very much like a modern automotive enamel that is designed to be heat cured
Yep.
onto the planes. They were all familiar with the heat curing process from Japanning, and so I think that they, it probably transitioned right into a heat cured enamel. Just because of the durability you see with it. I mean, a Miller's Falls plane is just about as difficult to strip as a Japanned plane.
Right.
It's very durable.
That was my next
You
question.
also, you can go back as the Craftsman planes, which were produced by Miller's Falls and Sargent early on, came out in 1928. Um, I think the red frogs probably showed up about 1930, maybe 31, 32 on the Craftsman, and they were enameled. So the bodies of those planes were still japanned because at that point Sargent was still japanning the bodies, but when they specified the red frog, they went to enamel.
Right.
on the
Got a
frogs.
kind of mixture of using both.
Yeah, yeah. Most likely, I suspect on a lot of those planes that were sold by the third party hardware stores and retail outlets like that. Um, the manufacturer, had a lot of these bodies. They were just running them off their production line, and you see that in some of the early uh, Fulton tools, which preceded Craftsman. Some of them have the Sargent model numbers on them, even though Sears sold them under a model number that was a Fulton model number that looks nothing like that. They were obviously right off the line Sargent planes that they just stamped Craftsman on the blade or stamped Fulton on the blade and sent them out.
So,
So
so what other pigments have you messed with then? Like kind of like more natural ones that would react with the Japan.
I have messed with the mercury oxide, uh, and just to see how well it worked, and it worked quite well. It's incredibly expensive to Japan a plane with the original red mercury oxide pigment today would probably cost you, I don't know, $300 or $400 in pigment. Probably a few years off your life, and definitely some IQ points. So, I have fooled around with cobalt blue pigment. That was one of the first pigments I fooled around with, and that's when I did found out that it's just not ground fine enough,
Right.
and that's how I learned about the mulling process to mull it finer on a glass plate to be able to get it to because it doesn't dissolve, be able to get it to be so fine that it's completely in suspension and stays in suspension in the solvent and the oil. So
I think that's a difficult part. And like you're saying, the asphalt actually dissolves within the
yeah,
turpentine.
yeah, when
So
you mix
it becomes
Japanning,
part.
it's yeah, when you first go to mix Japanning and you do that 50-50 asphaltum to turpentine, you don't add the linseed oil until later. We'll talk about that. But when you first blend those together, it's like the asphaltum just vanished. I
Right.
mean, you have black water. It's just as thin as the turpentine. It's like you put nothing in it, but it turned black. But within about 2 or 3 hours, it starts to get thick. It starts to thicken up and undergo a little bit of a chemical change in there as that asphaltum goes from kind of a quick dissolution into, I guess, forming some short chain polymers. So it's interesting, and I think it's tempting to add too much asphaltum at first. Just trust your ratio, 50-50, stir it, let it sit for a few hours, come back and we'll talk about this, but you want to stir it at least once a day for the first couple of days because it's continuing to undergo this change as the asphaltum dissolves into the turpentine. It goes from very thin to hopefully a little too thick. I always tell people you want to mix the 50-50 ratio. If you go right with 50-50, you will be a little too thick. And that's what you want because you can always add some turpentine and thin it down. But if you try to add asphaltum because it's too thin, you don't have enough solvent left, enough available solvent to dissolve the asphaltum that you add, and it'll form a grit in there and kind of become a paste, and it'll frustrate you forever.
Yeah.
So you always want to mix it a little thick at first. It will be thick at 50-50 ratio. Stir it, let it sit. Stir it the next day, let it sit. Stir it a third day, let it sit, and that's kind of what you got. You'll be close to where you want on thickness at that point. You thin it down with just a little bit of turpentine to get to that like cake batter mix, and then you add your linseed oil, which will thin it down just slightly, but not much, and then you're good to go. You don't want to add the linseed oil until you have the Japanning, until you have the asphaltum and turpentine where you want it, because the linseed oil kind of stops the process of the asphaltum dissolving, and you'll end up with potentially more grit in your finish. So.
And I'm not saying you might talk about this coming up, but what about the shelf life?
I think if like any other varnish, if you keep it away from the oxygen, it will last a long time. So there's the old tricks of, adding marbles or clean pebbles to raise the level up as you use up what's in your container. So there's very little air at the top. Um, I tell people you can get a can of that wine preservative spray, which is really just argon gas in a can. And you spray that in there before you close the lid. Argon is heavier than oxygen, so it'll settle on top of your finish. That's a great tip for any kind of a finish you have, any kind of varnish that keep it from getting that crusty surface is put wine preservative on it. If you do that, I think that undisturbed, I think the stuff will last years. I when I manufacture it, I pack it before I seal the can. I fill it with argon gas, so it's inert gas in there, and then I put the can in a vacuum bag, and it's sealed in a vacuum bag. And I've I've pulled some out that's been in there for 2 years, and it looked like the day it went in. I'm not sure how much longer than that it would last, but I suspect maybe a decade. But once you expose it to air, and if you're using it up and the can's half empty, and you're not doing anything to kind of keep the top of it from polymerizing when it's subjected to oxygen, I would say a year. It'll start to get thick, and once it gets a little too thick, you can maybe thin it down with turpentine once, but by the second time you try to thin it, what's really happening is the linseed oil has polymerized, and while you can thin it, it won't cure now when you heat it
Right.
because there's no polymerization left. There's no hardening left from that linseed oil.
Yep.
So,
Fantastic. Thank you.
yep, sure. Okay, let me find the magic button here again. I got to find my mouse to start. There we go. Right. Well, we'll just about wrap this up. We talked about colors. Um, some of you may know, oh, can't remember the guy's name. He was on Hand Planes and Coffee a lot. He does a lot of the kind of traditional wood body planes that he likes to work with. Rafael Herrera. He and a friend of his have fooled around a lot with the red Japanning and been very successful. He's shown me some of the planes he's done, and they look great. But they have molded the pigment down to a finer pigment, but had real good results with it. Let's get down to some real nitty gritty. I mentioned the Rublev gilsonite. You can see a picture of what the container looks like there. That's a great source of gil. They call it gilsonite. I thought they sold it as asphaltum, but they're using the trade name gilsonite. That's a great source if you want to mix your own, and you can get that locally. It's very reasonably priced. It's very good quality. It's the same as what I use essentially. It's ground to the same consistency, so it works fantastic. I get mine from the American Gilsonite Company, a guy up in Utah, where they mine it. Is where I buy the gilsonite from. I hope he doesn't quit selling it, or I'm gonna have to go find another supplier. Um, they do also mine asphaltum in Malaysia. Um, so depending on where you are in the world, you might find some sources there. But the only sources I've seen out of Malaysia sell it in like 100 kilo bags. Um, uh, Asphaltum or gilsonite is used commercially in a number of applications. It's besides just artist paint. Artists use it for a dark brown or black pigment in oil painting. It's used in the oil industry. They use it to lubricate the drilling shafts when they're drilling for oil. I'm not quite sure how that works, but that's why it's sold in 100 kilo bags because they dump tons of that stuff into the hole as they're drilling for oil. It is used in some other commercial coatings. I don't know which ones, but it's still in production, but finding it in reasonable quantities can be a little bit of a challenge sometimes outside of the artist world. Um, as far as brands of turpentine, I get a lot of questions about that. There's pure gum spirits of turpentine, not a regulated term, but generally that refers to turpentine that is being harvested from the tree, like a maple syrup would be harvested from a tree. There are still places that they do that. Most turpentine is a byproduct of the lumber industry where they take the scrap wood from the milling process or the chipping process, and they distill it. They heat it and distill the sap out of it and produce turpentine that way. I'm saying linseed, but turpentine. Um, Either one of those turpentines works fine. I've used them both. I see no difference at all. I currently use pure gum spirits of turpentine. One is I kind of want to, if they're really harvesting it from the trees the way they say they are, I think that's a neat thing to preserve. So I try to support that. But mostly I can get that in 5 gallon cans easier. So I'm using pure gum spirits, but I have used regular off the shelf brand of turpentine, works just fine. Um, as far as linseed oil goes, you definitely want to use boiled linseed oil. You don't want to use twice boiled linseed oil, which is out there, and you do not want to use raw linseed oil. The raw linseed oil will not cure. I don't know how many heat cycles it would take to cure it, but you just won't get a hard surface. Um, the double boiled linseed oil, it can cure too fast and wrinkle your finish, and which you'll be very unhappy with. So just straight up boiled linseed oil works absolutely fine. The brand doesn't seem to make any difference. Um, I wouldn't use something that's been sitting on your shelf for 10 years, but other than that, it's not that sensitive to the products themselves. Um, you need something to measure it with. Whatever you use to measure these things, I wouldn't put it back in the drawer where you do your baking. And I definitely recommend eye protection and maybe a respirator when you're working around the turpentine. The smell of turpentine doesn't bother me, but it's very noxious and it's probably not good to be breathing it. So I do ventilate when I'm mixing it. Of course, I'm mixing large quantities. If you were mixing just a small amount, probably not a big deal. Gloves are always a good idea. Um, just your usual, safety precautions. If you don't know this, and I think everybody on this show does, be careful handling linseed oil. It is a self-polymerizing oil, so if you have rags that are soaked in it, whether they're paper towels or actual cloth rags, they can spontaneously combust, and I have seen it happen. A house behind mine caught fire because they were staining the floor and they threw all the rags in the trash can. And they were staining the stain had linseed oil in it. And I think maybe in this presentation you might see video of the fire that I went over and fought until the fire department showed up, and it just about burned down 2 houses. So it really does happen, and it happens with surprising ease. So um, be careful around the linseed oil. Um, Process matters. Here you can see I'm mixing a gallon. I mix it by the gallon. I usually do several gallons at a time when I'm producing this stuff. Um, don't do that unless you're going to Japan a couple of cars. That's a tremendous amount of Japanning. And but again, measure by volume. If you're going to do turpentine in your asphaltum, if you're mixing a reasonable quantity, maybe you do a cup of turpentine and a level cup of asphaltum. Doesn't have to be packed down. Just scoop it up, level it off. By volume, your 1-to-1 ratio right there. You're good. Um, you can whatever volume you need, but do it by volume, not by weight. Particularly if you're mixing small quantities. I, Typically, you're going to mix maybe a half a cup, a quarter cup of turpentine and asphaltum together, get your mixture down, and then add your linseed oil to it. And that's going to be a lot of Japanning. That's going to be enough to keep you busy Japanning planes for a while. That's enough to do a dozen planes at least. The key is to stir it really well, let it sit, stir it again, let it sit, and just keep doing that over the course of 2 or 3 days until you're sure that that asphaltum has dissolved as thoroughly as it's going to in the turpentine. And at 1-to-1 ratio, it should virtually 100% dissolve. Anything that's not dissolved in there probably is a contaminant that got in there and is not going to dissolve. But again, you'll let that settle out. Only once you have that mixed and you've given it a few days of stirring, you want to start looking at your thickness. The viscosity of the Japanning is kind of important. It's not super critical, but I tell people you want it to be a little thinner than honey and about like a cake batter, maybe a little thicker than cake batter. Somewhere, if you're between honey and a cake batter, you're fine, right? If it's too thick, add a little turpentine. If it's too thin, you got problems. You can't really add more asphaltum powder to it because it's not going to dissolve. What you can do, if you want to save what you've started, is mix some more asphaltum into some turpentine in a separate container and mix it heavy, maybe 1.5 to 1. So you get almost like jello after a day or two of stirring that. Then you can mix that into your too thin mixture and thicken it up. And that by doing it that way, you won't get all this undissolved asphaltum powder in your mixture that's going to cause problems in your finish. But generally, that shouldn't be a problem. You should end up a little thicker, and you should end up adding a few drops, a quarter teaspoon of turpentine to thin your mix down. Stir it up real good and see what you got. So once you have that consistency, honey to cake batter, then you want to add in your linseed oil at half of the total volume, right? So it's a two to one ratio. Stir in the linseed oil really well. It will kind of not want to mix initially, but stick with it after a minute or so. It'll suddenly just kind of just blend right in and mix right in and disappear. Once you've done that, give it a really good stir, and then just go let it sit somewhere at room temperature. Something Fahrenheit 70 degrees, Celsius something in the 20s. A little warmer is better because it stays a little thinner when it's warm, and anything that's undissolved will slowly migrate down to the bottom of the can that you mixed in and settle out. And that's what you want to do. I always tell people to let it sit at least a week before you use it. 2 weeks is better. Keeping it at 29 degrees Fahrenheit is even better. It's a little thinner at that temperature. It'll settle out faster. I keep mine in the summertime. When I mix it by the gallon, I put it in the attic of my shop, which has a black slate roof that faces south. And I don't know what the temperature is up there, but it's an instant sweat when you walk up there. So it's probably 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And anything that doesn't dissolve settles out pretty quick. In the wintertime, I'll set it in the same room as my boiler, which probably sits around 25, 26 centigrade, in the mid to upper 70s, maybe 80 degrees Fahrenheit, just so it's, again, settles out faster. If it's below 60 degrees, stuff's going to be so thick, it just won't settle. So, Scott, if you're putting it in your shop, not going to work. Same for Sean. It won't work in Sean's shop either. Too cold. But once you let it settle for a week or two or longer, the longer the better. Don't stir it, don't drop it, don't shake it, and you're going to have a really good mix. You're going to be very happy with it. It's going to perform very well for you. Let's see. Oh, there you go. There's the fire. That was the fire at the neighbor's house, started by BLO, linseed oil. We talked about this already. We already talked about the mixture, too thick, too thin. Turpentine substitute. If it's not real turpentine, just give up. These substitutes just don't seem to work. Naphtha works. Acetone does not work. Asphaltum does not dissolve in acetone. It doesn't dissolve in denatured alcohol. I don't know of any other solvent that works. Naphtha and turpentine was what were traditionally used in Japanning. So I don't know of any other solvent that would work. We talked about prepping the planes. Citrus strip, that's what's here in the States. That seems to work extremely well. I have used this other premium paint remover, which is incredibly noxious. And how do you dispose of that horrible stuff when you're done with it? So I would go with some kind of a citrus-based stripper if you can find it. The trick is keeping it moist overnight. You put it on thick, put it in a plastic bag, squeeze all the air out, and let it sit at room temperature overnight. And I think you'll find that your Japanning will come off pretty easy. If you have a media blaster, it's a great way to go, but not many folks do. So here's a couple of tips if you're going to Japan a plane. Before you strip the plane, take some pictures of it. Because you're going to be surprised once you strip it down and you look at it, you're not going to remember exactly what had Japanning on it and what didn't. Particularly in something like a block plane with a movable, adjustable mouth. You pull the mouth plate out and you're like, well, was any of this japanned or not? You don't remember. Were the rails on the cheeks japanned? What about the pin that goes across and holds the a screw cap on a plane? So take some pictures so you know what to Japan and what not to Japan when you go to brush it on. We talked about stripping it. Once you've stripped it with these solvents, the citrus strip is kind of water soluble. You can wash it off with soap and water, dry it thoroughly. Obviously, rust is your enemy there, so you want to dry it really well. A hair dryer, air compressor works real well to get the rest of it dry. You You can put it in the oven at low temperature and warm it up and get the rest of the moisture out of it. But then I suggest wiping it down with either acetone or a denatured alcohol to just make sure you've got any oils off the plane. I also recommend before you start applying the Japanning that you run the plane through a heat cycle, only about 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes, at somewhere between 350 and 400 Fahrenheit. What we have found, Mark Webster, if you guys know him, who does really amazing restorations, or he calls them refurbs, because he modernizes the finishes on them. We found that some oils sometimes get deep into the cast iron, and those will come out in the heat process. And if you don't get them out prior to, they cause fish eyes in the Japanning. They just cause the Japanning to repel away from that. So by heating it for about 10 or 15 minutes and then letting it cool, obviously, before you work on it, any of that oil that somehow got deep into that cast iron will come out to the surface. You can then wipe it off with any alcohol, and then you're ready to Japan after it's all cooled down. So I think that heat cycle, it's very recommended for powder coating, and I found it to be a real good practice on Japanning. Might be a good practice if you're using some of these other finishes as well. Might get a better bond with the metal if you make sure that metal is clean. Oh, it's a short video of I think, yeah, this is what it looks like when you strip a plane in a media blaster. It's almost like you're spraying silver spray paint. It's cheating, really. I haven't done my penance stripping enough planes, so yeah, it is definitely an easy way to go. But anyways, that's what it looks like when I do it. By the way, if you're curious about it, I use a glass bead media, typically between 40 and 60 psi. It does not remove any of the metal. Harder media like garnet or aluminum oxide can definitely start to remove metal. What would happen is you'd see like the lettering start to get kind of soft and less relief. But the glass bead media is pretty harmless to the metal itself and is pretty effective at stripping the planes. Okay, so application of the Japanning. Really, the first thing is make sure you're working in a comfortable room temperature environment. I learned this the hard way. I Japanned a plane in the winter in my shop one time before I had a heater in there. I had a poor heater. I was warm. It was about 65 in the building, and the Japanning was a little thicker than I would have liked, but I thought, well, it'll be okay. It did not self-level. All the brush strokes, all the unevenness, everything stayed in the Japanning through the heat cycle. Even when I brought it up to temperature slowly in the oven, it did not have a chance to self-level. And that's what the Japanning is really famous for, is as it flows out, all the brush strokes go away, it reaches the same level. There's no high spots or low spots. Um, but if you're below 72 degrees Fahrenheit when you're doing it, you lose that self-leveling process and you won't get a good outcome. Um, I have tried heating the body of the plane itself and applying the Japanning in a cold environment to a warm plane. It works, but it better be a small plane and you have to go kind of fast. So again, far better off to do it at a time when your shop is a very comfortable shirt sleeve temperature. You want to be dust free. That plane I told you about that I let sit for several months to see if the Japanning would cure. I also found that it had a nice coating of sawdust embedded in the Japanning. So you want to be in a dust-free environment. Once you apply the Japanning to your plane, the best place for it is in your oven. Relatively dust-free, undisturbed environment. Let it sit in there for 15, 20 minutes, let it self-level, and then you can start the heating process. If you don't have time to heat cure it, don't start Japanning it. Because every little speck of dust or insect in your shop will find itself in the Japanning. Use good brushes. Small artist brushes work really well. They don't have to be camel hair or anything special, but an inexpensive artist brush you can buy a set for $9 or $10, $15. Some real fine ones to get in some small places, maybe around the lateral lever, which I don't recommend removing. You can do it. It's risky. You can also just Japan around it with a very small brush. That works great. But get yourself some good brushes. You don't want to be using one of these cheap chemical brushes you might use to brush glue on because it's going to drop brush hairs in your Japanning. Um, it's good to have a lint-free rag or some good quality paper towels nearby. So when you accidentally wipe the brush across the cheek of your plane when you're not paying attention, you can wipe that off real quick. So you'll get some Japanning in places you don't want it. You can wipe it right off and just move on. It's not a problem. If you make a real mess, a little bit of turpentine, you can clean it up. And also, the turpentine is about the only way to get Japanning off your hands if you don't wear some plastic gloves. Your hands will be Japanned. It stains pretty well. It stains clothing permanently, I can guarantee you. And shoes, socks, concrete floors. I've tested it on all that. Um, okay, so when you go to Japan, typically you're going to do at least 3 coats. 4 coats is always going to produce a good result. But the most critical thing is the first coat is what I call a brown coat. You want to put that first coat on real thin. You want to brush it out to where it's not black at all. It looks brown. Um, and I can't tell you exactly the chemistry behind this, but what I can tell you is by putting on that first thin coat and heat curing it, um, the other coats that seem to adhere better and flow better. You don't get any, you get less sagging because you're not going to apply it too heavy. And you just get a better result. So I always say do a brown coat first. You're going to go through the heat cycle, which we'll talk about in a minute, and then start building your coats after that. How thick do you put it on? Just the same way you'd put on an enamel paint if you were painting something with a brush, or if you're painting a door or some trim in your house with latex, but you're trying to do a really good job and you're planning on putting on 2 or 3 coats of latex. You're not trying to get away with it with 1 coat. It's pretty much the same on your plane. You do all the surfaces at the same time. You don't have to do the cheeks and leave it on its side because it's going to run or it won't run if you don't put it on super heavy. It won't sag. You won't get any drips or pools or anything. So, um, Japan, the whole thing, uh, you know. Um, on some of the block planes, there might be some pieces that you like some of the lever caps, you might have to Japan one side and then cure it because the other side it has to sit on something. And if you do the underside of the lever cap, you'll turn it over. A scrub plane, a Stanley scrub plane is a good example. That screw cap or lever cap is japanned on both sides. You don't want to Japan both sides and set it on a tray and cure it. It'll be stuck to the tray. So do one side, cure it, then do the other. But the body of the plane, cheeks, uh, inside of the plane, all of it at one time is fine. Um, the rails. So the rails of the plane, believe it or not, some of them were japanned. Most were not. Well, they were all japanned at the factory. But what happened is, at least on Stanleys, that's kind of, we always talk about Stanley planes, they're the most numerous out there. Um, After I think of the Type 6 or 7, they started linishing the rails, where they would run the rail of the plane against a sander and flatten the top of the plane rails off. I think they did that more because you typically got casting flaws right along the edge of the rails, little air pockets. And so you'd have, rough spots in the rails. They said, well, just sand them down flat and that'll take out any of those casting flaws. Well, it also removed the Japanning that was brushed on there. But if you go back and look at some of the really early Stanley planes, Type 5, Type 6, and earlier, you'll sometimes see Japanning still on the rails. Now it's very subject to wear there, and a lot of it gets chipped off. But if you find one in good condition, you'll see that the top edge of that plane was japanned. But after that, after the Type 8s and 9s, they were linishing the top of the rail, so they're not typically they don't typically have japanning on them anymore. And I think that's true for most of the manufacturers at that point. Notably, Union is powder coating the tops of the rails on their planes. If you look at the XOAs, they're japanned or powder coated on the rail. But that's why I tell you about taking pictures before you Japan. The lateral lever. Okay, so the lateral lever is difficult to Japan under. The lateral lever, the washer or the bottom part of the lever swings over a little pocket. And that little pocket under there obviously was Japan because it was Japan before the lateral lever was installed. But removing and installing a lateral lever is very risky. It's very easy to break the top of that casting off. So I don't recommend it. Um, I recommend just getting one of those real fine artist brushes, and you can get under the lateral lever and apply the Japanning. And if you get a little on the lateral lever, you can just wipe it off with your rag before you put it in the oven, and you'll be fine. So I would Japan around and under the lateral lever that way. The Y yoke is easier to remove on planes. Driving out that pin on most planes is fairly easy if you want to do it. And Japan the yoke separately and not Japan the pin because the pin was not Japanned. You can do that. Or you can Japan it in place. You will get Japanning on the pin. All right, it's inevitable. But when it comes out of the oven, the yolk will be kind of stuck. But as soon as you move the yolk, it'll break free and it'll operate fine, even if you got Japanning on the pin. On my personal planes, I leave the yolk on there unless I'm replacing it for some reason, and I just Japan it. I get Japanning on the pin. It's a very difficult place to see the Japanning, and I'm okay with that. Is it exactly the way it came from the factory? No. The pin was put in later. The pin was never Japanned. So you can go whichever way you want there. I don't like risking the castings. I'm not going to remove a Y yoke if I don't have to. So, any questions about that?
We don't have any hands up
Okay.
at the moment. We're all good just now.
You can see in the picture here, here's a block plane that has a adjustable mouth on it. This one is a Sergeant. You can tell by the eccentric adjuster up there. And I japanned the inside of the mouth. I don't or of the mouth of the plane. I don't recall if that was originally japanned or not when I took it off, but I knew I didn't want it to rust, so that's why I japanned it. Obviously, the metal to metal contact areas you don't japan, so you can see the edges of the. My mouse might work on that. You can see the edges of that mouth plate. There's no japanning on those. No, I'm not that good with a brush. I'm sure I got some on there, but I just wiped it off with a paper towel before I heat cured it. But you don't want japanning on your metal to metal contact surfaces. Obviously, on the bed where the iron beds or the frog beds, you don't want japanning there. Um, Later planes, the inexpensive ones, the um, Hercules, I think, some of the other, in the 1950s when manufacturing and quality really started to fall by the wayside to price, you will find a lot of those surfaces painted. I think that's partly why those planes don't necessarily perform as well on the less expensive planes in that era. So um, down here at the bottom, it's a little video of me doing the brown coat on a I don't know what kind of plane. I think that might be an old Stanley. It looks like it's got a washer, but it's got the twisted lateral on it. Um, so yeah, I'm not sure what plane that is. No more. Oh, I know what that is. That's a Sigley. That's a Sigley made by Stanley because it has no size on the bed, no markings on the bed at all. They were, marked, stamped on the irons and sold under many names. But you'll see very little japanning on the brush, and you can see just how far I go with this first coat. So the brush was completely clean, so that it's not soaked at all yet. And I covered it probably 2 square inches. As the brush soaks up, I'll cover a little more. And this is that first coat, and I'm brushing it out. And again, the color's not great here, but when it's all done and you look at it, it's more brown than it is black. And that's the first coat of japanning. Subsequent coats to that will be heavier. They will be, like I said, as if you're painting the trim of your house, but you intend to put 2 or 3 coats on it to get a really nice finish. Same with japanning the plane. You can see I go right on up the cheek. You see I brush away from the cheek rails. That helps not get a lot of it on the rail because I'm not going to Japan the rail of that plane. That gives you an idea of what it looks like. So when you're doing the frog face, you're definitely going to be using that paper towel and wiping Japanning off those machine surfaces. Again, we're trying to recreate the Japanning finish as close to original as possible, but we're not going to machine the plane. So we have to brush the Japanning around the machined surfaces. This is not the way it was done in the factory. That casting was raw. It had no holes in it. It had not been machined. The mouth probably wasn't even open yet. And they probably used a 2 inch wide brush and went over it once, twice, and just threw the panning on it. Off it went to the oven for the first coat. And then everything was milled afterwards. But we don't have that luxury. We don't want to remill the plane, so we're going to brush around the surfaces that were machined. Um, so you get the idea. Doesn't take long, to be honest with you. I can Japan a plane, the first coat, as fast as I can mask it off and tape it. The nice thing about Japanning is you don't mask anything off. There's no reason to. If you get Japanning where you don't want it, you just wipe it off with a paper towel or a rag and keep going. So I find it to be as fast to apply. It is slower to cure. You're going to spend 4 hours curing each coat of Japanning. Whereas with like a spray enamel, I don't know, an hour or two maybe, or 15 minutes between coats. So it is not as fast as spray enamel, but it is not slow. So heat curing up to and including size 5 planes will fit in mini countertop toaster ovens. I don't know if there's an equivalent to this in the UK. You guys will have to let me know. But here in the States, we have these small countertop ovens. Many of them will accommodate a size 6 plane, but none of them will accommodate anything larger. The bottom left picture here, I actually took 2 of these toaster ovens and joined them together and made a toaster oven that was large enough to do a number 8 plane. I produced uh, I think I might have even had a video. I produced a lengthy um, guide on how you could do this. I helped you guys may know Ted from he used to be in Guam. I helped Ted build one while he was in Guam over the internet. He built one just like this. It was great, but it did exceed the um, design limits of the heating element. So it lasted about a year and a half, and the heating element gave up. So I cured a lot of planes in it for a while, but it could not reach temperature anymore. But for smaller planes, a toaster oven, I've known people that have cured them in an electric skillet. Some of these have like you have an electric skillet that's about 15 by 15 with a lid on it that's got some height to it. You can put like a small chicken in one of those skillets, and they have a thermostat, and you can set the plane in there, and you can cure those in a skillet. Um, I have a full size wall oven in my shop that I bought for Japanning purposes. Um, you can cure them in your house oven. All right. If you're not single, you will be after you cure it in your house oven. It will not ruin your oven. You absolutely can continue to bake cookies and anything else you want in it, but your house is going to smell like you opened a gallon of turpentine and left it on the counter all day. It's pretty strong odor. It does go away. It doesn't get into anything, but it's a good way to upset the missus. So I don't recommend using the home oven for curing, but I have done it. I have used a gas barbecue. Here in the States, we have propane barbecues. You may have butane barbecues. You cannot use a charcoal barbecue because of obviously the ash. Um, I have a natural gas barbecue now, and I have cured a plane in there. I had no reason to, other than I had somebody say, "Hey, I'm going to try this," and I thought, well, I'll give it a try, because it seems like you could do it, and it works fine. The only catch is you don't really have a good thermostat on a grill, so buy a really good thermometer. I bought one of those ones with a plug and a remote, that little cable that came out, digital. It's like $14, so I could monitor the temperature. Um, I ran the oven before I did the plane, and I figured out um, if you go to my website, you can download the kind of a bench guide to how to Japan, and I've got temperatures in Celsius in there. I don't know them off the top of my head, but Fahrenheit, your first cure is 2 hours at 190 degrees Fahrenheit. I figured out where the knobs needed to be set to get 190 degrees, and I marked it on the barbecue with a marker, and then I ran it up to 350 to 400 degrees as the second cure temperature for 2 hours, and I marked where that was, so I had some starting point when I went back to actually put the plane in the barbecue, because there's no, you can't set the barbecue for 400. There's no 400 setting on it. It's just a low, high, whatever. Um, but I put the digital thermometer in there and cured a number 8 Stanley Bedrock plane, and it came out just great, absolutely like it was in my other oven. So no problems. Um, I did have a gentleman that was doing that. He told me he forgot about it. I think there might have been some alcohol involved. And he got up the next morning and realized he'd left his plane in there all night. It consumed the entire 5 pound bottle of propane. And he said it was the hardest, most brilliant finish he's ever had on a plane. So apparently you can't overcure it. You can't overheat it, but it was set to 400 degrees. It ran at 400 degrees. It just ran for about 8 hours. Um, and he said it came out great. So pretty forgiving stuff.
We've got a question from Gordon McCall.
Yeah.
I'll just add him. He's on the side there. Hey, Gordon.
Hey, I was just going to add a comment about Japanning in your kitchen oven. Like Greg said, it will stink. Um, and there is some residual odor afterwards. And I've
Okay.
found that if I crank it up to like 500 or 550 for half an hour, it'll burn all that off, and you won't be able to smell anything in your oven after that.
Good to know. Good to know.
It's a tip from a single guy.
By the way, I can say Gordon knows what he's talking about when it comes to Japanning because he was an early uh, person to join me in the Japanning ventures, and the first plane he Japanned looked so much better than anyone I've done since that I'm kind of ashamed to Japan planes anymore.
Oh,
So-
come on.
But he does fantastic work if you've seen any of the planes he restores. And so if you have questions about Japanning, you can certainly ask Gordon as well. He knows all about it. So um, if you're going to cure in a barbecue, or I cured in my house oven once, and it was a gas oven. And one thing I did learn is that you want to preheat it just a little bit. Just light it up, let it run for a couple minutes, shut it down, and then put the plane in there. Because when that oven first lights with the gas, it produces a lot of moisture. It becomes very humid. And the first time I did that, I flash coated the plane in rust. So we just did all this work to get the plane nice and clean, and now we're Japanning it, and the Japanning was fine, but all the machine surfaces were rusted again. Now it came off quite easily, but get the moisture out of your grill or your oven if you're using any kind of a gas appliance, just by a real short heat cycle before you start. Thanks, Gordon. Good tip.
There we go.
All right. Let's see. I think we're about to the end here. Let's see what else we got. Well, we talked about we'll talk a little bit more about the heat cure process, because I just covered it real quick. Again, there is a guide on my website. If you go to the website, you just go to the blogs or the Japanning section, and you'll find these. They're PDF files you can download. One is all about how to mix your own Japanning. One is about how to apply and cure Japanning. And there might even be one I wrote about stripping the plane down, but that would be kind of dated now. But anyways, the information's there. Um, I do recommend 2 heat curing cycles. I took that one guy's 5 cycles and I boiled it down to the 2 cycles. Works extremely well, and I've gotten some feedback from a guy who spent 30 years working for the 3M Corporation doing coatings. And he was very familiar with Japanning and the materials because they use stuff like that at 3M in some of their materials. And he said that what I had kind of stumbled into or experimented my way into chemically was made a lot of sense. He said, what you're doing is chemically the correct thing to be doing to cure this Japanning. The first heat cycle, I put the plane in with the oven off or just slightly preheated if it's gas. And then I kick the temperature up to 180, 190 degrees Fahrenheit, not any hotter. 190 is the max. Again, the bench guide has it in Celsius, and run it for 2 hours. That kind of off gases the solvent from the Japanning, but not so quickly that it causes it to wrinkle. I then slowly raise the temperature over the course of about 20 minutes, going up in like 50 to 75, maybe 100-degree increments. Again, about 20 minutes. I go on up to 400. I don't go any hotter than that. You certainly can. I think typically Stanley was curing at close to 500 degrees. I don't do it because I just don't want to subject the casting to it. I've never had one warp, but I think it's possible. Although we know that they've already been through kind of an annealing process once because they were japanned at the factory and they were heated to 500 degrees. But it cures fine between 350 and 400. I think it cures a little better, closer to 400. And I don't see any need to risk going any hotter. So I do a second heat cycle at 400 degrees for 2 hours, turn the oven off, let it cool down. That piece of cast iron is going to stay hot for a long time. Don't reach in there and grab it like I have done on more than one occasion. It will burn the daylights out of you. So let it sit in there for an hour or two, cool down. If you're really anxious, you can get it out and set it on your table saw and let that heat sink pull the rest of the heat out of it if you want to get onto your next application. But as soon as it's back to room temperature where you can handle it without gloves, you can go on and start applying the next coat of Japanning. As I said, Japanning is a very good sandable primer. So as you build coats, if you have some flaws in there, something got in the Japanning, you have an area that the casting was very rough. Some of these planes can have some really terrible castings. Ohio castings are very rough sometimes. You can sand the Japanning. I've used about a 400 grit. Gordon, I know, has done a lot of this. I don't know what grit sandpaper he's used, but you can sand it down until you get that imperfection kind of sanded out, and then wipe it with acetone or turpentine again to get all that dust off before you apply the next coat of Japanning. Uh, Gordon was the first one I know that really did that. He used the sanding as a, or the Japanning as a sandable primer, and wow, does he get some glassy satin smooth finishes by doing that. So, and I have taken to doing that myself now. If I really want an absolutely perfect finish, I'll sand like coat number 2, and then I'll go coat number 3, see how it looks. Usually it's fine. I'll do a 4th coat, and I'm done. So just make sure you wipe it down thoroughly before you apply the next coat. I definitely don't recommend the use of Japan dryers if you're doing metal. If you want to play around with it and you have success, please contact me and tell me how you managed to achieve it, because I never did. Um, what else? Better to be, if you're not too sure how thick a coat to apply, air a little thin than too thick. You don't want to always, you don't want to be real thin because the Japanning needs to flow out. You need to have enough of it that it'll level out and your brush strokes will go away. But if you're the kind of person that's really impatient and you think, well, I'm going to do it in 2 coats like Stanley did, there's a reasonable chance that you're going to get some pooling of the Japanning down in the cracks and crevices and along the cheek to bed joint and things like that. So plan on doing 3 coats at a minimum, maybe 4. You'll be much happier with the results. The thing I just continue to try to harp on is if you try to take shortcuts, um, stripping the plane back and starting over again is just a lot of work. So follow the process. Believe it or not, I've to date have never had anybody have a bad outcome with their Japanning. I did have one customer reach out to me and said that they had a very gritty finish. I was mortified. I said, I'll send you a new can of Japanning right away. Give me your address. He said, well, I didn't buy it from you. I made it myself. And so we talked about how he mixed it, and he like stirred it once, and that was it. And so he didn't have the asphaltum dissolve. So I helped him with that, and he got good results afterwards. But people get amazing results. Everybody that pans a plane, I'm jealous every time I see it. I think their work looks better than mine. I'm just amazed. One note on here, the machine surfaces sometimes come out of the oven with a little bit of a golden or yellow cast to them. Something about the outgassing of the turpentine will deposit that on the machine surface of the plane. It generally will rub off pretty easily with a rag, or you can, depending on what you're trying to do as part of, if you're not preserving patina, you can use a Scotch-Brite pad, but it buffs off quite easily. I don't usually worry about it down in the mouth of the plane. But you can, I've reached down in there and buffed it off too, with a brass brush. So if you see that, it comes off pretty easily. I haven't tried solvents on it, but I wouldn't be surprised if acetone might also help remove it. The Japanning, once it's cured, by the way, if you're ever cleaning a plane up that has good Japanning and you have paint spatters on it, as we see so often, acetone will not harm the Japanning once it's cured. So if you have paint spatters on a plane and you want to remove them, a little bit of acetone on a rag will dissolve any enamel paint that might have splattered on your plane. If it happens to be latex paint, denatured alcohol on a rag will also take that right off the Japanning and won't harm it.
I've got a question from Chester. If that's
Yeah, hey Chet.
There he is. You're muted, Chester.
Mute, unmute. Does that work better?
It does.
Yeah. I didn't have a question for you. I think that everything that you've said and everything is very, very complete. And, and right now I'm, Gordon McCall is helping me with a little project of mine, and he's amazing. But I just wanted to really compliment you and thank you for the presentation. But in the compliment, besides it being a very complete presentation and not boring at all, I've been cleaning my office all around listening. It's been really wonderful. But what I wanted to say, in particular, that caught my eye as an art director, I think your graphics have been exceptional and really nicely presented.
Well,
A little
thanks.
chance card in there and things like that, a bit of whimsy. I think it's really exceptional, and I just wanted to
Well,
thank you for doing the presentation.
I appreciate that, Chet. I have
Yeah,
no artistic skills whatsoever, so
I
I
think
really
you do.
appreciate that.
I'll have to dispute that with you. Here's Gordon right here. Look at that.
Okay.
Let's see if he's. Do you have that piece, Gordon?
I do. Yeah.
You should show Gray what you're working on for me. This is
Oh,
This is
oh yeah, I know what that is.
this is only the first coat. So
Wow.
um,
really looks
it-
good.
there are some drips on it and stuff, but I'm gonna sand that off, and
Okay.
it's gonna look much better. You know, like there's a
Yeah.
big
Yeah,
blob
I
there.
see that.
That'll come right off, and
Yeah,
subsequent um, coatings will make this look much better than it does now. But
that's
I wanted
great.
to get one coat on it so it didn't rust after I blasted it, and
Yep.
I need to be able
It's
to open the windows of my house to do more Japanning on something this big. So,
Yeah.
it's
um,
going to replace the Stanley Handyman version that I have on my bench with the wooden wedge that I made. So
Very
I'm
nice.
excited about it. But
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, any rate, I didn't want you to go,
No,
Greg,
it's great.
without my compliments.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Gordon, thanks for showing that. So you guys can see on the back side, one of those holes that he was pointing to. You can see where the Japanning kind of ran through the hole, probably when he was doing the top surface and pooled and formed a thick area. And as he said, he'll just sand that down. What grit sandpaper do you think he'll use there, Gordon?
I'll probably actually scrape it off or use
Okay.
a sharp like an X-Acto knife or something, just
Yeah.
right off. And like
Okay.
I said, 400. You
Yeah.
don't want to use too coarse of a sandpaper because it will show. And
I
it,
don't think it's in a
Right.
functional. I don't think it's in a functional position on that piece to warrant removing it at all. I think sometimes I'd like to find those little things on a plane where it has a little bit of thickness and stuff. But
If you ask him, if you ask Gordon real nice, he'll leave a nice thumbprint in it for you.
yeah.
yeah, I'm okay with that too. It'll be your signature.
There you go. No, that's nice to show though. So if you're doing a plane and you do get a flaw in your Japanning, as we said, you can shave it down with a razor blade and then sand it down. And Gord makes a great point. You know, I usually use 400 grit or finer, and your next coat of Japanning it'll completely disappear. Just make sure you wipe it off. You know, with a solvent, acetone, alcohol, or turpentine before you put the next coat on there. But that's great. Thanks for showing that. That's going to be beautiful.
Another thing, the reason I raised my hand is you talked about casting flaws. If you
Hmm.
have a plane or anything that you're doing, it has a big ugly spot right there where you're going to see it,
Yeah.
a large pit or something. Use JB Weld epoxy like Bondo and then sand it smooth and then Japan right over it, and you'll never see it, and it'll hold up to the heat. in the
Oh, that's
curing.
great. That's good to know. I would not have known that. I've never
That's
tried
a
it. So
nice trick. That's a
yeah,
very
Yeah,
trick.
good point.
good
Excellent.
stuff. I've
Don't
done it
make that thing
many
so
times.
nice I can't use it, Gordon.
Well, thankfully the casting on this is very good. So I got to make some standoffs to stick through these holes so that I can set it and Japan the bottom and top and cure it all at once.
Yeah.
Because this has one coat on it, but I had to go through two cycles because I got this
Yes.
side, then this side.
Yeah, that gets old, doesn't it?
Has the smell in the kitchen gone away yet?
Oh yeah, yeah. But I got a text message from my power company. It says your electricity use is way over average for Monday and Tuesday. That's the truth. They know.
Wow.
But
Interesting.
I
Okay.
can show you, and I'm also doing a saw joiner. So this is also one coat, and that's going to be fun. See, there's a little blob on that one too.
Yeah.
But it's like Greg mentioned earlier, temperature is everything. Um, we've been at 10 degrees Fahrenheit for like 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It's too cold in my house. So unless I want to crank the heat up, much rather Japan when the weather is warmer. Plus, I can open the windows for the kitchen oven, and it makes things work a lot better. But
Have you considered, Gordon, buying from a yard sale or something, just a little shop, what are the toaster oven? And for these small pieces, Greg said that it worked fairly well and it might save you
yeah,
on
but
electricity.
in the winter, I'd have to go out into my
Oh,
shop. It's freezing cold out there,
yeah.
and if you saw what I see out the window, you wouldn't go out either.
Yeah, no, I have the same situation.
Have to hitch the dogs up to the sled and
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. You saw my shovel plow that I
the
have.
only way to heat my shop is to start it on fire. But here's
Well, Greg showed how to do that too. Just get
yeah.
yourself some BLO.
Yeah.
Those
So
are
here's
not,
an example
those are
of the
really
saw
nice.
joiner. That's what this is. It's just another one that I've completed.
Oh, yeah. Okay. There you go. Yeah.
You know, the
Beautiful
the
with the
saw
filing.
blade
Yeah.
goes in here and you file it.
Yep. Wow.
Um,
Nice.
this all my other planes are all put away. I have my windows replaced in my house, so everything's packed up and I can't show you my number one.
Ah. Very good. Ah, that's great. Thanks for sharing that stuff. It's
Yeah,
excellent. All right. Well, I think that's just about the last slide here. Hope I haven't bored you guys to death. We talked already about, is the plane you're looking at, is it japanned or enameled? I mean, if you if you're trying to duplicate what was on it originally, then you need to make that determination. But if you just want to Japan something, well, have at it. And if it was Japan and you want to enamel it, your tools, your rules. Whatever you want to do. But keep in mind, Miller's Falls were never japanned; they were always enameled. Um, I wish I could tell you a solid date that we know exactly that Stanley switched over to enamel, but I can't tell you. I'm not a Stanley collector, so I don't have enough of those planes to try to make that determination. But I would be really shocked if anything after World War II was japanned, unless they were bodies that were, sitting around that were older. But if that plane is of an era that it was cast after World War II, it probably is enameled with an automotive type Bacon enamel. Um, you can tell sometimes by looking at the lettering, the Japanning is a little thicker material than the enamel, and so if you happen to have two planes side by side, like a Miller's Falls Type One or anywhere there's lettering, the Made in USA on a Miller's Falls bed, and you compare it to an older Stanley that you know is japanned, you'll see that the lettering on the Stanley, like in an O, it's a little pooled, it's a little filled in because the Japanning was thicker, in between the letters. And so you can kind of see the difference if you compare them. But that's about all I have to say. In the end, can you do it? Absolutely. It has been a real surprise to me how successful people are with this. I really never expected it. And I'm not kidding. Everybody I see that Japan's anything, whether it's the guy that's doing the fans I had a guy this collects antique coffee grinders, a particular brand, and I found out there's a whole rabbit hole of coffee grinder collectors, and the bodies of them were cast iron, and they were Japan. And he sent me a picture of it afterwards, and I was like, "That is magnificent! I just can't get over it." Of course, MMSI Toolworks, Nate there with his some of those Stanley clamping for picture frames that he's restored in Japan are just unbelievable. And then all the hand planes, they just come out looking so fantastic that it's been great. Should you do it? Hey, that's entirely up to you. Um, you know, if you want to grab a can of spray paint and you're happy with the finish and you're happy with the durability, absolutely, go for it. I have. I just didn't like the durability of it. I didn't like masking them off either. I really didn't enjoy that part. But always your tools, your rules. Can you do it? You bet. You can mix your own. You can buy it. I don't. If you want to buy the Pontypool and you want a large quantity, have at it. If you want to buy pre-mixed Japaning from me, I'll be happy to ship it to you. I am shipping anywhere in the world now that I know of. I've shipped to a lot of places. Uh, a lot of times I try to help people find the materials locally because shipping and VAT tax and all that stuff can get expensive. It kind of bothers me when the shipping costs more than the product. When I ship it to Australia and they're buying an $18 can of Japanning and they're paying $30 to ship it, I find that annoying. And so I try to help them find the materials to make their own if they're interested. Um, but by all means, if you're interested and you're thinking about it, if you have a way to cure it, any kind of a heat source, I say give it a try. It's a lot of fun. So, any final questions for me?
We do have another hand up. Let's just see. There we go. We've got Phil with his hand up first, I think.
I think Stephen's up. Stephen's up first.
Stephen's up, sorry. Sorry, Stephen. There we go. Had a spotlight. There we go. Evening,
Okay.
Stephen.
I have two questions. One is Lee Valley and their various tool manufacturers, are they Japanning or enameling?
They're enameling, or actually, they're probably powder coating. Powder coating is even more environmentally friendly than enamel, and it's I think a simpler process. So I would venture to say
Right.
all your high-end tools that have a finish like that are probably powder coated.
Okay. The only reason why I ask is um, one of our members in the group was having a finish issue because where they were clamping down, they left clamp marks on the coating. And so I was just wondering if it
Yeah.
is a realm of fixing
You know
it.
that, yeah, that could happen to I think any of the products, whether it's Japanning or enamel or powder coating, if they do it too soon after it's cured. Even when the Japanning comes out of the final heat cycle, I find that it's about 48 hours to 72 hours later that it really gets super hard. I don't know if it's latent heat or what, but I think if you were to put a lot of pressure on it with a clamp, you could leave a mark in it. I think the same is true with powder coating is really a powdered plastic that is melted onto the surface and bonds. So it's
Yeah.
got some give to it, and you could leave an impression in that. So I think it could happen to any of the products, but I'm pretty certain most of those companies are powder coating because they don't. When you powder coat, any of the powder that doesn't stick can be captured and reused, and
Right.
it's fairly inert.
Yeah, I'm very familiar
It is
with powder.
microplastics, which we're having trouble with, but yeah,
Yeah, I'm very familiar with the powder coating process. They
yeah,
use an electronic anode
yeah,
cathode
yep,
process to charge the particles and then they electronically adhere and so on.
yeah,
Now, my other one is I'm in California and getting solvents seem to be a, well, it's who you're buying it through.
yeah,
Um, Amazon seems to be able to get around the shipping codes because Birchwood Casey which is for various products like gun browning, barrel browning, and some of the other elements that you couldn't go down to the local gun store and buy them anymore.
Oh, okay.
Order them, you can order it through Amazon and you can get as much as you want.
Interesting. I know that in California, because I looked into this at one point, it's actually county by county that have banned some of the VOCs. I think it started up around San Francisco, whatever county that is. And there's about like 5 or 7 counties that have virtually banned all VOCs in California. And what happened is a lot of the big box retailers like Home Depot or Lowe's, they don't want to get down to that level of granularity in what they ship. So they just went, basically in all of California in their stores, they just stock the non-VOC equivalents. But realistically, they can be sold in a number of counties in California. And I have run into folks that I know live in some of those counties that actually go to Nevada and buy the solvent that they want and then, of course, take it home. But
Well, and yeah, that goes all the way back to Everclear, the old days of now you can get Everclear in California, but I'm in Sacramento County,
there you go. Yeah.
which is the state capital, and they have laws and rules on various types of solvents, but it depends on who's shipping it.
Yeah, interesting.
And so it just depends. It's on a almost a product by product basis. So
Yeah.
so for anyone out there that's got a local ordinance against VOCs, check and see if Amazon will deliver.
Yeah. Good point.
Because
Thanks, Steve.
Amazon seems to have put everybody else out of business, so you might as well. You might as well,
Yeah.
win a few or lose a few.
Yeah, I hear you.
That's it. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a great presentation.
Well, good. Thanks. I appreciate that. I did this for the Midwest Tool Collectors meeting up in Erie, Pennsylvania last year, and it was a lot more fun in a room full of people. It's always more fun and energizing to actually be face to face with folks, but
Right.
I enjoyed having the opportunity to share it with you guys.
Well, we're overall, we're all over EU, uh, the United Kingdom, North America. We even get to Australia. So, I mean, we've
Yeah,
got people all over the place. So this is a much more interesting group of people.
indeed. Absolutely. Very good. Scott,
I
any more
did.
questions?
Yep, we've got one more. Thanks, Stephen. Let's just
Yep.
remove it. Spotlight. And we've got Phil. Add spotlight. There we go. Evening, Phil.
That's great. Thank you very much for spending the time to prepare that and give it to us. I did have a question, and I'll come to it in a minute, and I'll explain why you've already answered it. But again, the point is thank you. That was interesting for me. It's probably not something I'm going to do, but even so, just learning about it and understanding how it relates to the planes that I see and use, that's really good. It was pitched, I think, at a very good level. So thank you. My question was going to be, had you given this to other people, but you just explained you've given it to the Northwest Tool Collectors.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a good canned presentation. It works well for us. So
Very good.
I've lost my question, but the rest of it stands. Thank you.
That's right. I appreciate it. I during COVID, I was doing online seminars, try to share this with people, and I actually did. I did a 3 day like class on Japanning. The first day was preparing a plane, stripping it
Okay.
down. The second day was mixing Japanning, where I actually mixed it and had people had the ingredients and stuff. And then the third day, third weekend or whatever was actually applying it, heat curing it. And then those sessions are recorded and they do exist on my website. Some of the information in there I've updated since. I've changed the curing temperatures and bumped them up a little bit, but if somebody's looking for some information and wants to listen to me drone on about this process, they can always go watch one of those videos. So,
No, there's no droning. That's good.
okay, very good.
Thanks again.
Sure.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks, Phil. I'm just going to open this up and remove your spotlight so I can see everybody. That's a bit
Absolutely.
better. Take all of you. Anyone else got any other questions? Greg? No? I'm just going to say then that was a fantastic presentation, Greg. It's well practiced, and I'm not saying the lack of questions is that there was so much information in there that you kind of answered a lot of the questions as you were going, which is phenomenal. It's well practiced. It was very well presented, and we're much appreciated to having you here.
Well, thanks, Scott. It's good to see a lot of familiar faces and some that I haven't met before.
I will reiterate to everybody that if and when we do have hand planes and coffee or a plane life on in America, they're welcome to join that as well. Sometimes Fridays and Saturdays.
Yep, I wish I could.
I always enjoyed joining both. It's got a slightly different feel to it sometimes.
Sure.
I like talking about plane types and collecting, not too much, but it's always interesting to even spend time with anyone online talking about planes. And Japan is just really interesting. A bit like Phil, I think I'm far too cold here for doing Japan.
Far too cold.
Most of the year.
Most of the year.
I need to do that like the one warm day that we get in the summer, which we don't plan for. But fantastic presentation, Greg. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thanks for the invitation, Scott. I appreciate it. And we're not doing hand planes and coffee regularly like we were. My goal is to try to do at least once a month. I've already fallen down on that. I apologize, guys, but there's been some challenging life events going on here. But Scott is on the mailing list. So, Scott, anytime you get that invitation that we're going to have a session, feel free to share that email with anybody.
Absolutely.
Just like this, it's open to anybody. And just like this one, you can come and go as you please. It's, I think, much the same crowd, although I think maybe we might be a little less skilled on our end. I see an awful lot of highly skilled, experienced tool makers and woodworkers that show up on Bench Talk 101. I'm looking at Richard there when I talk about skill set. Oh my gosh, that guy. And of course, Andy Brown. I mean, it's just unbelievable, the collection and what his knowledge. So, but we do have a good time as well. So.
It's always nice to get a presentation, and I think Chester nailed it in the head, and that is from somebody who's passionate as well about what they do. And not just about collecting planes, but also about your Japaning process. You've obviously been through enough questions in the past, and like I said, excellent presentation. There was absolutely nothing missing from that, I don't think. Except my stupid questions about where paint comes in and where Japaning doesn't. That's just my lack of knowledge on planes and stuff.
All good questions.
When you hear somebody talking like that, and you can hear their passion and what they're talking about, and you do have an extreme passion for planes and woodworking, and as well as Japan, it's very nice to hear. Thank you very much.
It's been rewarding to, I think, kind of solve the riddle of Japaning, which really vanished once enamel showed up. Nobody seemed to save any information about it, and just to make it available to people. It's been a real treat. That seems like, if somebody's interested, now they have the tools and the materials and they can do it and be successful with it. And that just makes me feel good that folks have that opportunity to create something from our past. So
fantastic.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that, Greg. Just going to have our usual way of finishing, and that is a toast to the bench. So to the bench and to absent friends.
The bench and absent
friends.
On the bench.